Recently, Collin and Samir did a video about how YouTube podcast made a difference in the US presidential election. I think there is a lot to learn as business owners, as online business owners, and as content creators. People like you who might be making content and trying to figure out, how do I make my content stand out more? How do I reach more people? How do I get more leads? There is something that can be learned in the two strategies that we saw Trump take and we saw Harris take as it pertains to being on podcast. And then for us, people like you and me who have podcasts and are on YouTube, what if we could grow to the point where we actually make a difference in politics? And that may not even be your goal. Your goal might just be to make a difference in your niche. Regardless, there is much to learn. We're going to go through what they say, so let's dive right in.
In the lead up to the 2024 election, Donald Trump went on 14 podcasts that got 124 million views on YouTube. And Kamala Harris went on 5 podcasts that got 4 million views.
Just the absolute difference between the sheer amount of views that Donald Trump got, 124 million versus 4 million, going on all those podcasts versus not going on many. They're going to talk about the difference between new media landscape, podcasting on YouTube versus legacy media, and just the vast difference it made. But I hope you just see from the very start, this is a powerful medium that we are on. And if it's driving leads to your business or affecting presidential races, it's just as powerful. And this is kind of an amazing thing that we get to be a part of this, and we get to make content on platforms that have this big of an influence.
Chow from Vox said that every presidential election is a snapshot in time of the media landscape. And this election is being referred to all over as the podcast election. And a lot of those podcasts took place on YouTube.
So this is interesting. They talk about this later in the episode, but a lot of these podcasts weren't just audio podcasts. These took place on YouTube, and that's a really important part of this whole thing. Back in the day, when you thought, or at least when I thought about podcasting, I thought about audio, and I thought about a podcast exists on a, it's hosted somewhere, and then that audio is sent out to the directory. So it's sent out to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And that obviously still does happen, and people do subscribe to podcasts, and that's very powerful, and that's a great way to do it. However, if you have a podcast, please consider putting the video portion of that podcast on YouTube as well. I did this for years over at my first online business, Preaching Donkey, where I would send the audio to the directories and have a subscriber base there. And I also posted the video on YouTube because why not? There's such a massive way to reach people. But here's what's interesting. I've always thought about YouTube as merely a way to be where the people are, to be able to rank and search on the biggest, search engine in the world next to Google, but it's also owned by Google, all of that potential. But they point out time spent with a person is really important. And Donald Trump got a lot of time spent on these shows with the people who watch them, and that made a huge difference. They're going to talk about this later on in their episode about how this applies to you and me. But don't discount just the sheer impact of what podcasting did. Now they're going to break down the actual shows that the different candidates went on, and I think this is interesting.
I'll start with Kamala because that was a shorter list.
Okay.
So the ones that I could find were Call Her Daddy,
Yep.
which is a massive podcast.
Heavily aimed at women.
Yeah, with Alex Cooper. And there was a 7-minute clip or 7 or 8 minute clip there, not the full episode on YouTube. All the Smoke, which is Matt Barnes, former NBA player, his show.
Mm-hmm. And Steven Jackson.
The Breakfast Club with Charlemagne. The Checkup with Dr. Mike.
Dr. Mike got in the mix. Okay.
And Club Shay Shay with Shannon Sharp, which was the most viewed episode. Of Kamala sitting down with someone at 1.6 million views. The total of those views is 4 million views across those 5 shows. Now, when I went over to the Trump side, I started with the Bryson DeChambeau. Is that DeChambeau? Wow.
Let's just say the golfer.
Bryson. Yeah. The Bryson video of Trump and him playing golf, which is not technically a podcast, but it's a very long video. It's an hour-long video of them hanging out and playing golf together.
What was interesting about this was the crossover. When I had a friend who isn't really into politics all that much, doesn't follow this as closely as others, but he's massively into golf. And he sent me this and he said, hey, you may not know who this person is, but he won the US Open last year. And he has this video with Trump and it's really entertaining. And this is when I first started to see, wow, there's there's a strategy here that I think is really, really smart.
Yeah.
And that did
What is golf but mainly conversation?
That's 12 million views. Then you go down the list and you go, he went on Logan Paul's podcast, Impulsive. He went on All In. He went on Aiden Ross's stream, which when you click into that is like this crazy scene of him just sitting at a computer with a bunch of people behind him. He went on Lex Friedman. He went on Dr. Phil's show, Fill in the Blanks.
Of course.
Which did 17 million views on
Dr.
YouTube.
Phil cracks me up. He sounds like my uncle in Oklahoma when he talks. Like they have the exact same cadence and the exact same voice. And so when I hear Dr. Phil talk, it feels like I'm hearing my uncle talk.
You want to bully them, bully me, Buster.
Anyway, it's neither here nor there.
He went on the Dave Ramsey show, which was uploaded to his personal YouTube channel.
At least I know this about Dave Ramsey, who I've done impressions of before.
It's an honor to be on
Better
your
than
show.
I
deserve. How can I help?
But Dave Ramsey and Joe Rogan both say that they invited Kamala Harris to come on as well.
Our team reached out to Vice President Harris's team about the opportunity to sit down with her for a long-form interview.
Joe Rogan, she wanted certain terms he wasn't willing to do.
You could look at this and you say, oh, you're being a diva. But she had an opportunity to come here when she was in Texas, and I literally gave them an open invitation. I said, anytime. I said, if she's done at 10 o'clock, we'll come back here at 10 o'clock. I go, I'll do it at 9 in the morning. I'll do it at 10 p.m. I'll do it at midnight. She's up. She wants to, drink a Red Bull. He actually reached out when she found out that he was coming on. So their camp reached out to me. So I said, great. I would love to talk to her. But it was very difficult to tie it down, and they wanted to travel. And see, the thing is, like, you can't, if I go somewhere, then there's going to be other people in the room. And they want to control a lot of things, I'm sure, according to the Brett Breyer interview on Fox. Like, people were waving him off. That's a distraction. People in the room, like, my whole goal with her and with him was just talk. Just have a conversation like a human being. You find out things about people. You get a sense of them, at least, a real sense. That was it.
But in both of those cases, it didn't happen. And we can see Dave Ramsey interview got millions of views, but the Joe Rogan got 46 million views just on YouTube and counting.
Went on the Ben Shapiro show. He went on Andrew Schultz's show, Full Send with the Nelk Boys. He went on Bussin' with the Boys. He went on the Patrick Bet David show, 6 Feet Under with Mark Calloway, former WWE wrestler. Joe Rogan Experience, obviously, which is the most infamous one.
Yeah.
And Theo Vaughn, which is probably the second most infamous appearance. This is 124 million views for Trump on YouTube. And the reason I clarify that is because all these shows have other distribution platforms, right? Yeah. Maybe outside of Bryson's Golf Day. Like Rogan across audio platforms probably does equivalent, if not more, than what it does on YouTube. And it did 46 million views on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, so there you have kind of the differences between the two. I wanted you to see that because I wanted you to see just the sheer volume that Trump did on these long-form podcasts, one after another, after another, after another, and racked up 124 million views just on YouTube.
Obviously, one side adopted the new media landscape of let's put our candidate on long-form podcasts and let's put him in environments where it's a little bit out of control.
And yet friendly. I think you have to say
sure.
that. Like Kamala
fair.
Harris did 60 Minutes. She did Brett Baer on Fox. Those were much more adversarial, right? Like traditional media, if you choose to go on certain platforms, it can be a lot more adversarial. The podcast that Kamala Harris went on and that Trump went on, it's kind of like an endorsement. It's a safe space to hopefully be yourself and appeal to an audience.
So if you think about this quote that every presidential election is a snapshot in time of the media landscape, I actually think the episodes that Trump went on is more reflective of the current media landscape.
And where it's moving.
The reason I say that is because if we look at like what is that evolution, the obvious is the move from traditional legacy media to new media. When we look at the social media landscape of the past 10 years, we've gone from this world of these platforms being user-generated content. Instagram's a place where anyone can post, photos and videos, or YouTube, people are posting interesting vlogs, and it's gone from there to like established episodic shows with massive audiences. Mm-hmm. Like Theo Vaughn's show has a massive week-to-week audience in the millions.
Social media has been both democratized and the standard has risen. So what do I mean by democratized? Democratized, I mean it's accessible to anyone. You today can start a show, and if that show takes off and people like it and you stick with it, you can, in 4 or 5 years, be one of these dominant players. That is possible. It's democratized. There are no gatekeepers. You can just start a YouTube channel today and buy a camera today, or just get your phone and get going. But at the same time, the standard has rised in terms of what rises to the top, because that always happens. When you have saturation, you have curation. People kind of navigate through who the best are, and those rise to the top. Now, here's where, when it comes to online business and it comes to the way that I teach online business, the democratizing is what I focus on, because it is possible for people like you and people like me, and I'm speaking for myself, not a superstar, don't have millions of followers, don't have millions of views, but my goals are met. Both my money goals, like the amount of money I want to make, the amount of people I want to impact, the type of impact I want to make. Why? Because my content is targeted to a specific type of person, someone who's trying to figure out how to make an online business, trying to figure out how to do it without understanding all this complicated tech. That's why I talk a lot about Kajabi, which, by the way, Kajabi right now is 50% off for the next few days. LaneSebring.com/Kajabi. You can jump on there and you can get started making content, building your podcast, building your entire system. You get all my bonuses, the Kajabi Accelerator course, you get the 25K course launch email template, and you get my masterclass, the top 3 mistakes that new Kajabi users make. And you get 50% off for the entire first year that you're on it. This goes through Friday, November 15th. So if you haven't jumped in there yet, use my link. Go do it. That is an affiliate link, so I do get a small commission. LaneSebring.com/Kajabi. The reason why I talk about Kajabi, the reason why I teach online business the way I do, is because content has been democratized. We can jump onto platforms and we can reach and talk to a specific group of people. And if we reach those people, bring them into our email list, serve them at an even deeper level, and then offer them our paid products, we can have a business. And it just so happens that if your goals are broader than that and you want to go bigger than that, you could be the next Collin and Samir that have millions of subscribers and millions of viewers and making a massive, massive impact. By the way, they use Kajabi as well. They were at the conference in LA just a few weeks ago. I was right there in the flesh with them.
That move is significant. That it's playing out. Everyone knows it. Everyone who listens to our show knows that's happening. This moment and seeing Trump's strategy felt like this deep stamp, especially when you look at the viewership. And I think that it's not just the viewership. The next thing I did in this Excel sheet is write down total time available with each candidate on YouTube. Mm-hmm. For Trump, that was 16 hours and 53 minutes. And for Kamala, that was 3 hours. We're talking about like available time to click in and watch something.
Are you making enough content where people can spend enough time with you to begin to build that know, like, and trust factor where they know you, they like you, and they trust you? That happened, whether you voted for Trump or not, whether you agree with this or not, that happened with him much more than it happened with Harris because he showed up in places that she didn't. That's just a statement of fact. It is not a political statement. You saw the numbers. The way this translates to your business is, are you showing up on the platforms consistently enough, and in some cases long enough to make the kind of impact that you need to make? And some of that comes from people just knowing that you are there. This is why, if you've noticed on this channel, I've started making much more content than I ever have made. And it's not like I'm getting a ton of views on each video. In fact, if you look at my views, they're not really that impressive, but the consistency will win over time. And one of the things that I like to teach people how to do is how to make a living online in your online business that replaces your 9-to-5 income without having to build a large social media following, because it is targeted and you bring people in who affinitize with you and who want your help. And then you put them through your funnel, serve them in an even deeper way, and then offer them your stuff. By the way, LaneSebring.com/workshop, my Turn What You Know into Dough workshop, lays out exactly how to do this. It's free. It's on demand. You can watch it today. It'll show you how to make your first $1,000 a month consistently in your online business. That's at LaneSebring.com/workshop.
I think like those, if we just look at how they both looked and felt, traditional media makes you look and feel like very put together. It's like very
elevated. It
controlled,
feels like
elevated.
a prestigious moment, right? To get to interview the president or a potential president. Mm-hmm. And in the past, I think creators have like risen to that moment. The few creators who've had the opportunity to like have a creator or have a president or a presidential candidate on their channel, it's been an elevated sort of like look and feel, and it's normally shorter. And I think Trump went the opposite way. He was like, I'm going to make it so normal for me to show up in everyone's place that they probably didn't even think I was going to show up, and to do it over and over and over again in the style that those creators actually do.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to somebody at the Kajabi conference in LA a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the difference between having a big name on your show versus going on someone else's show. And the difference when you go on someone else's show, so let's say in your space, you've got people that have podcasts that cover the same thing that you cover. When you go on their show, you reach their audience. So when Trump goes on Joe Rogan's show, Trump reaches Joe Rogan's audience. In the same way, we always feel like, wouldn't it be amazing to have XYZ guest on my show, right? Wouldn't it be amazing for me to have Donald Miller, Justin Welsh on my show? But what would be even better than that would be if I went on their shows, if I went on their platforms, if I guested on them, because now I'm speaking to their audience, which is far more valuable. I'm reaching people that don't even know about me yet. And even if they came on my show, because I've tested this, when I did Preaching Donkey, I had a podcast and I thought, if I can just get XYZ big name, I'll put the name in the title and I'll have people watching. And what I found is that nobody actually cared. What they cared about was the content. Now, if I went on their show and I was able to speak to their audiences, now I'm reaching them, provided my content is good enough and reaches them where they are. So all of this matters.
He was able to become so familiar to people.
I actually think Rogan Set is one of the most familiar looking sets.
Totally.
Right. It is just one of the most familiar looking sets. And to see him there was kind of jarring. It is kind of like back in the day watching like your favorite sitcom and like a celebrity cameo happens.
Yeah.
You're like, what are they doing in the Friends coffee shop?
All right, now they're going to draw out some conclusions and things we can learn. And there's one piece in here that I think is massively valuable for all of us to grasp.
The first thought is that raw, unedited vulnerability and authenticity is where we currently are and probably where we'll be for a while.
Here's what I think is massive about this. I track politics very closely. By the way, in my last video where I discussed politics, I kind of misspoke, and I had a friend call me out on it. I said, I'm not a political guy. This is not a political channel. What I meant is that I don't make politics a part of what I do on this channel. But of course, I follow politics. It's hard to not. I mean, this has been the most interesting 4 or 5 months or 2 years or however you look. It's been an interesting time to live in the US, and I'm paying attention. I just don't make it my whole personality, and I don't talk about it a lot publicly, and I don't get on here and espouse my opinions because it's not really what this channel is about. I'm analyzing some results here. But one of the things that I noticed as I was watching this play out was Trump was willing to get on and sit for, let's say, 3 hours on Joe Rogan and talk about anything Joe Rogan brought up, and they just had a conversation. With Harris, I saw a much more careful approach. There was a cautiousness to the way that she went about it. For example, I saw one person ask her, what did you vote for on Prop 36 in California? Which Prop 36 was a measure that would make shoplifting a felony again in California. It had been made a misdemeanor, and this was going to make it a felony. I'm simplifying it, but that's essentially what it was. She was asked this question as a California resident and California voter, and the way she answered this question was, my ballot is on its way to California, and I voted, and I encourage everyone to vote. Well, how did you vote on Prop 36? I don't want to say.
Madam Vice President, have you returned the ballot to California, and how did you vote on Prop 36?
So my ballot is on its way to California, and I'm going to trust the system that it will arrive there. And I am not going to talk about the vote on that because, honestly, it's the Sunday before the election, and I don't intend to create an endorsement one way or another around it. But I did vote. Incredibly
Cautious. What would have been far better in every one of those circumstances would have been to say, this is how I voted, this is how I think, this is what I'm going to do. And she avoided that out of what I think was a misplaced sense of caution. I don't want to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, think the wrong thing, and alienate XYZ coalition of voters. where Trump is just willing to go out there and you either love him or you hate him. There's really not much in between. And there's a lot that we can learn from that as content creators. Being willing to be polarizing. I'm not saying politically polarizing unless that's your niche, but being willing to have strong opinions. And this is something I really, really struggle with, because every human being has a tendency to want to figure out, how do I appeal to the most amount of people? How do I appeal to everybody? How do I make sure that I don't offend these people that I really want to reach? And having been a pastor for 15 years, I felt that very deeply, because I would work in churches where I knew people disagreed politically. I knew people disagreed on all kinds of things. And so trying to care for, minister to, pastor, preach, and teach to an audience of people that differ, you kind of develop a way of relating to people that kind of doesn't feel authentic to you, because you really can't just come out there and say, well, here's who I voted for, like you can't do that. So then you get on YouTube and you're like, okay, I know that there are people in my audience who feel very differently on these. And if I come down on this side, everybody's, half of these people are going to love me. If I come down on this side, half of these people are going to hate me and they're going to bail. And again, my channel's not even about politics, but I think about this even when I'm saying something that shouldn't be that polarizing, but is. For example, I think that you should completely maximize your organic reach before you start messing with ads. And some people think that that is controversial, because in their mind, you can grow way faster when you focus on ads first. And I think that your leads coming in through organic reach are far warmer. And if you just stick with it, with your organic reach for long enough, you will build an audience of people who love you and are willing to buy from you. It just takes a lot more intentionality, but the payoff is much bigger. Now, if you're not in this niche, that doesn't sound controversial at all, right? How is that polarizing? But I'm telling you, it is in some circles. So figure out what that is for you. What is the thing? What is the opinion that you could have that is actually a little bit polarizing? And how could you stick with that, even if it might alienate some people? Because what you want is for people to love you or hate you. What you don't want is that messy, warm middle where they just ignore you, or as Jesus said, they spew you out of their mouth, because it's not appealing to anybody. And I think he struck a chord doing that where she really didn't.
The current is unedited. Where you look at what happens on traditional media, it feels very proper. It feels very controlled. It feels very produced. Yeah. And because of that, we're having an opposite reaction to saying, hey, show me what's really happening. Long form podcasts show that. It's hard in a 3-hour time window to act or be fake or to feel overproduced, because 3 hours is just too long. Like Trump sitting in that chair for 3 hours is wild. Yeah. And I think Kamala on Call Her Daddy is a great example of it. I think she just did too little and few and far between. But long form conversation is nice because it's unedited. Twitch, again, is where we're seeing the most culturally relevant people. But that raw vulnerability, the messiness, the like mess ups, the clearing your throat, all that.
I think it's a requirement.
So raw, vulnerable content is going to win the day over curated and polished any day of the week. Now, you might be asking, how do I take what they're saying and actually apply it to my business? Here's a couple of things that I want us to kind of take away from this. Number one, be authentically who you are. And I'm saying this as someone who it's sometimes hard, because I'm making these same calculations. Will they like this? Will they not like this? Will they like me? Will they not like me? I saw Harris making those calculations, and it really, really worked against her. I saw Trump just go out there and say, this is what I am, and if you don't like it, he really likes to be liked, and he hates to not be liked, but that never stops him from just going out there and being who he is. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. So who are you authentically, and how can you translate that online? Second, are you making content regularly? Are you showing up so that people can get to know you? The way that this type of business continues to work, even in the face of AI, is the human element. People have to get to know you. They're not going to buy your products. They're not going to do your coaching. They're not going to engage with you unless they're engaging with a human, you. And the way that you show your humanity is by showing up, A lot. So are you doing content well? Again, I teach all of this over at lanesebring.com/workshop. Be sure to go there, check it out. And in this video right here, I actually show you my strategy for social media that results in $25,000 a month. And you can steal that strategy. Just click on that video right there and I'll teach you everything to do.